All right, we're back again. I know, lots of panels today, but some great stuff. Do you guys like the Crash panel? That was pretty cool. Yeah, I want to do more of those. You want to see more of those kind of retrospective things maybe next year? All right, cool. Yeah, I think that was great. Well, now I have the honor of introducing a guy who, like the Crash team, has been in this industry for so many years and building a franchise that didn't leave us behind at PS1. It is still stronger than ever. Mortal Kombat, Injustice, such an incredible studio, Netherrealm, that he's built in Chicago. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ed Boon. They love you, Ed. How are we doing, Ed Boon?
I'm doing really good. I always love E3, so great to see everybody.
And this year you get to relax, I think, unless you're announcing a new game here, which I don't think you are. But.
Well, no.
get to walk around the show floor. So this is pretty cool. Many years of Mortal Kombat.
Many years. Life probably more than some people here are alive.
Yeah. And what I think is so cool about your career is that Andy was saying here, they worked on Crash Bandicoot 6-7 years in, and it's like, I got tired of it.
Yeah.
Creatively you want to do something new. He's gone to Injustice, but you've stayed very loyal to Mortal Kombat for all these years, and it still feels like it fires you up.
Yeah, it does. The roller coaster of events that have happened, in parallel with the game have affected a number of decisions that we've made and whatnot. But for the most part, each game that we've done, we've been fortunate enough to have done well, and has what's the word I'm looking for? Has kind of lend itself to what we can do next is this, and so the team always has these ideas at the end of the previous game that has just kind of goes into our notebooks and just kind of fired us all up as far as going to the game.
Yeah, such an incredible franchise. So let's wind the clock back to the start of Mortal Kombat. Now this was a team of 4 people.
4 people, yes.
1 programmer, 2 artists, 1 audio, and you made this game in how many months?
In 8 months. 8 months, start to finish.
Insane. So 8 months, 4 people making Mortal Kombat.
We were on test 5 months after the first day we started. We went to an arcade and put it just for a weekend, kind of like the stealth thing, like 5 months from the day that we started.
Those were the old days, right? Where it's like something would pop up and pre-internet.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, yeah.
No one would know about it. Now, as people probably know, originally it was going to be a Van Damme game.
It was. We had... Originally, we I think Bloodsport was a big movie that was out at the time, and we put together this like a pitch videotape that we took. We captured screenshots from Bloodsport and put them in what was like a mock-up of a game, and had Van Damme kind of bowing to his opponent, and we got a couple of punches and kicks kind of simulated in there, and we sent it saying, we want to make Van Damme the video game, please, consider us. And again, we're a pretty small team at the time, so I don't know how serious we were taken, in retrospect. And he just kind of politely declined. And I think he had said something like they were working on a game with Sega at the time. Okay. With I think never got released.
Never came out.
Yeah, so I'm still waiting for that game to come out.
All for the better, I think. And the original game, I actually didn't know this, but it was 7 buttons, not 5.
It was. Mortal Kombat's button layout was high punch, low punch, high kick, low kick, and then a block in the middle. Originally, it was high punch, low punch, high kick, medium kick, low kick, and it was a mess. And
Did you actually test that? Was it in the test?
Well, not in the arcades.
No,
we tested, within the studio, and it was just too complex, and your hand had to move, too far. The buttons were so far apart, so we dropped that pretty quickly.
So when you were doing arcade stuff like that, did you have a test cabinet like you guys would all gather around? Like, what was development like back then for games?
It was very. Especially nowadays when you see how games are made, it was absolute garage band, setup. There was just a cabinet in my office that we got the assets going and the characters jumping around on the screens, and people walking down the hallway would hear an uppercut or something, or Raiden yelling something, and they, what is that? The game wasn't even an official product yet, and it was just word of mouth. Everybody just in the studio would just kind of, let me see this uppercut that you got going, and then they see the blood going, and they were like, can you do that? Can you do blood? And I guess we can, and there wasn't, we just didn't question things at the time.
Wow. Well, before we go further, I want to, there's a great sizzle that you put together on kind of all things Mortal Kombat. So we're going to take a look at that right now. This is Mortal Kombat. Check it out.
Fight. Finish him. Flawless victory. Get over here. Wins. Fatality.
Miss Cage. You're gonna fight me wearing that?
This is your life.
Yeah, it's amazing when you see the first games how far they look so archaic. Like now how far things have gone since just in the presentation alone. It's just amazing. Yeah.
But it's it's cool that it has had so much longevity, and we should reflect back on some of the games. I don't want to go through every one, but MK2, MK3, and I remember MK3. People were kind of angry because some characters were missing, right?
Yeah, they were. We got that was MK3 was the first first response or kind of lesson that we were learned as far as don't mess with this. Like you're gonna have a Mortal Kombat game, you better have Scorpion in it. And people were mad when we didn't have him in it. Same with Raiden. And so while we wanted to introduce new characters, we didn't realize that they had kind of ingrain themselves into people's, like their childhood. A lot of people, come up to me and they say, I'll never forget the first time I saw Mortal Kombat, the first time I saw Fatality. They'll be really specific. They'll say, I was at, this pizza place right by my house. My dad was paying for this. I went over, I heard everybody talking about it, and there's this great memory that people have of that first experience. I think that's part of what's made it kind of linger for so long in people's memories. It's like the first time they saw a fatality in Mortal Kombat or something.
So those early days, like MK 1, 2, 3, 4, rapid iteration, was gaining attention. Was there ever a point where you sort of wanted to give up on it? I mean, like any creative people, there are high points, low points. What was the sort of the low point for you in those early days?
At some point, like during Mortal Kombat 4, we had gone, nonstop from MK1. I remember working on Mortal Kombat 3. Literally, I was pulling an all-nighter, programming, and a lot of people were saying, "Oh, they just went out and saw the Mortal Kombat movie." Yep. And I'm working on the Mortal Kombat, third game, just missing everything. Just all of the hype that was going on with the Acclaim games and the movies that came out, and they started doing TV shows, and I think they had like a tour going on. All that was happening while we were with our heads down working on the next game, and it was a real push. People didn't realize how many hours we were putting into this, and so that exhaustion was kind of playing a big factor for us as far as just that and wanting to try something new. But the games just kept doing really well, and it had a significant role in Midway's financials.
They needed you.
Yeah, they weren't going to have us not do it, and so there was a little bit of also, well, if we don't do it, somebody will.
Right,
and so it was that we were kind of a little bit of, even when we were talking, the first Mortal Kombat, we started already, coming up with ideas for a Star Wars game. We were like, okay, we're going to do Star Wars next, and our general manager was like, no, you're not.
Get back to work on FK. I remember, when I was a kid, Mortal Kombat, was in arcades, and there would always be the home version that would come out, right? And you'd be waiting for that, and how good would it be compared to the arcades and things like that. And tell us a bit about those times, because I remember, there were times where it wasn't quite as good, it was a little different, but there was always that window. And I remember, I'd go to the arcade and play it, and then be waiting for the home version to come out. Yeah. So were you effectively kind of building each game twice in a way, like the arcade version, or how much conversion was there between arcade and what was being done for home?
Well, to Acclaim's credit, Acclaim was publishing. They had the rights to publish all of Midway games for a 5-year period.
Okay.
And Mortal Kombat came into that, and they contracted out other developers to do the ports. And so they had one group doing the Super Nintendo port, one group doing the Genesis port, and they were separate efforts.
Were you involved though?
Yeah.
Okay.
We had
approval and stuff?
We had we had to approve it. Before they could publish the game, and that caused problems. And so we were, we were in our 20s. We were a lot younger back then, and so we were very passionate. Very, you can't mess with this. And there was an issue with the blood stuff too. So the as you know, the ESRB ratings had come up. And
was it the Nintendo version didn't have blood? Or I can't remember what it was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the Genesis version had blood, and the Nintendo version had sweat. And they kind of watered down, and by watered down I mean ruined the fatalities in the game.
Yeah.
And they had so there was the Nintendo version, which looked a little better, and then there was the Genesis version, which didn't have quite the visual fidelity, but had the blood, and it played a lot better. And so, a lot of people credit that game, MK1, as a big leap forward in Sega's, kind of war with Nintendo with that system.
Let me ask you about sort of, some of those aspects with the fatalities and violence, and Mortal Kombat's been around for so many years. You've had to weather a lot of sort of storms around that type of stuff. And, I know that sometimes those things can take personal tolls on people, and you're one of the sweetest, nicest guys in the industry, but have these games that are, sometimes objectified in a way. How did all that, controversy around fatalities and violence and all that, how did that affect you personally? Was that sort of a dark period? Do you think people just don't understand it? Or, how did you try and interpret how people were looking at a game?
I always interpreted it as, as you guys saw, the first games, just the graphic fidelity was, really archaic compared to something that's now.
Yeah.
But at that point, it was a leap forward because it was digitized graphics. We were videotaping real people, and so all of a sudden there was just a little bit more of a connection between, wow, that person looks real.
Not a cartoon. It's
exactly.
A person, yeah.
And Street Fighter had come out a year or so before us, Street Fighter 2, and they were more like drawn anime type of a look. So all of a sudden when we had this realistic look and blood, it just got people's attention, and then we were, cutting people's heads off and doing all this stuff. And so I fully understood and in a lot of ways agreed with, a 6-year-old should not be playing this game.
Right.
But video games at the time were in this big category of more of a kid thing. And now I think the average gamer is over 30 or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. So now you have a 30-year-old is going to be able to take in. It's kind of like the equivalent of an R-rated movie. You know, so I certainly never had an issue with it. And when they said we need a rating system, I personally was like, yeah, we should have a rating system.
But for you personally, was there a responsibility that you started to feel around like, oh, maybe I shouldn't push as far? Because, you know, you guys were coming up with some of the wackiest ideas out there.
Yeah. I think there was a moment when we didn't have the rating stuff that I was like, yeah, you know, I wouldn't want to, you know, a
Right.
kid, you know,
Exposed to that.
But once we got that M stamp on it, you know, I kind of felt like that was the equivalent of, you know, a rated R movie or
Right.
something where people know that is what is the content that's in the game.
Yes.
You know, there were certainly some scarier things. I mean, you know, Doom, Mortal Kombat, I think
Yep.
Night Trap or something were games that were really held up as like, you know, examples of
Right.
these violent games. So that was, you know, on some level it bothered you, but they were kind of vilified, you
Right.
know,
Absolutely.
and probably more than I thought that they deserved.
Yeah. You know, it is also one of those brands that I think was a little more mainstream because there was the Mortal Kombat film.
Yeah.
You guys probably saw that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, video game movies have had, you know, a spotty history. Tell us about, you know, that film and getting involved. How involved were you in that? And I mean, there've been multiple MK films over the years, but that initial one, I remember as a kid seeing it, and it was the music. I mean, it was quite the production.
That film, you know, to the producers of that film and to Acclaim's credit, you know, I've always been pretty vocal about. I felt like they raised Mortal Kombat out, you know, beyond, you know, like a video game. It became like a pop culture thing, you know. That scream, that Mortal Kombat, that you know, that started that music and all that. That I think it was suddenly, you know, that was a song on the radio, you know, and all of a sudden the movie raised it too. So at some point while we were working on our games, we had Acclaim come in and say they're going to spend, you know, $10 million to advertise this game, and you know, in my head I was like, you know, you know, that's a lot of money to put behind it, and then a guy came in and said, you know, we want to make a movie out of this, and I was like, you know, you're insane. You know, this is nobody's gonna watch this, and you know. But like I said, to their credit, they were right, and they raised it, and we benefit from it. You know, after the movie and all that, and the home versions came out, and you know, even the attention it got for the violence, it just raised it to another level of kind of like in entertainment.
Was there ever a point where you wanted to take a break from MK?
There was, and actually we have. You know, the first 4 Mortal Kombat games were arcade games, and they were followed with home versions that we didn't work on. But slowly over time, the arcade scene in general was just kind of less people were playing in arcades. You know, the home
Systems were getting better.
Exactly, and that absolutely contributed to it. And so at some point, you know, I certainly became disenchanted a little bit with the arcade industry, and we were like, okay, let's do something, you know, goes directly to home, and you know, so we did a Mortal Kombat game, and then that was the one that we did directly to home, which was called Deadly Alliance. That, you know, that jumped up in sales. You know, we sold like, you know, 5 or 6 million of that game, and so they were like, we'd like to try something different. And they go, no, you're not. And then that was that same conversation.
You remember what did you want to do differently then? Different game did you pitch?
Yeah, you know, we did a arcade game called the Grid, which was like these
Got some applause for the Grid up there.
It was like 6 arcade machines linked together, which was a ride, and to me is like the most fun I've ever had playing one of my games was that game.
Sure.
But you had to buy, you know, to have that experience, you had to have 4, 5, 6 arcade machines in a dying arcade market.
Yeah.
You know, that's a tough sell for a. But at that point, we had kind of, you know, gone off and done that game, and then Mortal Kombat had like we did a game called Shaolin Monks, which was like an action adventure type version of that game. And you know, so, but they still had the label Mortal Kombat on it, you know, and so we're trying to kind of branch out and do these things while continuing to do the Mortal Kombat thing, which as I was saying before, was played a really significant role in Midway's financial
Prosperity. Then you got sort of your first crossover at Midway, MK versus DC Universe.
Right.
Steve Allison, all the guys are always thinking of how do we, bring properties together, do something cool, which I guess, in some ways, predicted in a way maybe where you were going to be ultimately with Warner Brothers and all this. But that, there are obviously lots of ideas for crossovers or guest characters back in the day and things like that. People want, where's the MK cross Street Fighter? Like, people always like have these ideas. Why was that the first one that you wanted to do with this MK versus DC? Because you were a very mature rated game. Yeah. Bring in DC, and I think you had to bring the rating down for that one, right?
We did,
yeah.
And actually, it wasn't our team's idea. Yeah. It was our one of the guys in marketing.
Marketing, yeah.
Yeah, he knew people at DC, and they said, you want to do this, and Mortal Kombat was really hot, so they were like, bring these characters, and there was. The game did well, but there was a lot of compromises. There was a lot of stuff going on with Midway started to really get unstable at the time. The T rating, I think, for Mortal Kombat fans to not have an M-rated game was like blasphemy, and then the guidelines that we had to kind of stay within in the DC.
Universe. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So all those things with Midway, and some of those things with Midway, I wish I could tell you about, but I'm not allowed to. It made that a really tough project to complete.
Yeah.
And so it was, like I said, it did well, and I think Mortal Kombat has so many fans that they're they come along with us for the ride, but it's that was a really tough project.
Yeah, and then, after that, there was this transition for MK, for you, moving over to Warner Brothers, MK9. Was that a point where you maybe said, hey, I want to do something different with my life or do a different kind of game? I mean, that was a reset with Midway sort of faltering. Yeah. MKDC was something different, but you said wasn't necessarily what the fans wanted. I mean, were you ever at a point where like, hey, I want to go off and make a character action game, or I want to go off and make a first-person action game? Like, 'cause, I mean, you're such a talented, creative person. I'm sure at some point, maybe this was your chance for a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, certainly, Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks was like, it kind of scratched an itch that we all had of, and we always look at that game as, in our heads we're thinking, that's not the last one we're going to do. We're always thinking that, we'd love to do.
You guys be into that? Something different.
Yeah. And we've had a number of conversations about that. At the time, we had already started Mortal Kombat 9, and the first thing that Warner Brothers said when we kind of got on board with them was, we're going to give you 6 more months, give you more time, make it a quality product, and that game ended up being the highest selling of all the Mortal Kombat games before it, which was really weird, some 18 years later or something like that, to have your best-selling one. And so that really kind of sparked the whole thing with continuing Mortal Kombat. But MK versus DC also kind of made it apparent to us that there was like a superhero game waiting to be made that didn't have the restrictions of Mortal Kombat or the violence of Mortal Kombat, that just kind of celebrated that, and that spawned the first Injustice game. And we've that did really well for us, and we just introduced the sequel.
Injustice 2, yes.
And so now
you guys
we're
playing Injustice 2? Yeah.
And so that started this new this franchise that we've been kind of alternating with Mortal Kombat at the time. So
yeah, and that's I guess that's fresh, but fighting games, you said you've done so many of them. Like you mentioned Shaolin Monks, I don't know if you guys know, they have an incredible mobile studio at Netherrealm, and I don't know if you guys have played Injustice or the mobile games, but it's amazing that you're able to do this across multiple platforms. Yeah. And also, I think push in new directions, because I think sometimes people think of these games as just fighting games, but I think we all know like the stories that you've built, and even Injustice, like a lot of talk about how great the animation is, and the lips. I mean, you're telling pretty epic tales.
Yeah, there's effectively a baked-in movie.
Yeah.
In our games, in the Mortal Kombat and Injustice movie, and so we have an entire team of animators, directors, story writers. Like there is a movie production that is part of the whole big production that is Mortal Kombat and Injustice, and and again that's a whole other kind of form of entertainment media. I think part of the reason that we've done like these little, we did like this puzzle combat thing, this motor combat thing, the story mode, all these kind of things is it's a little bit of what you're talking about. We're just scratching another itch while continuing this this gigantic behemoth that is the Mortal Kombat franchise.
It's also interesting to look at a franchise over so many years, because the technology was, very restrictive in the early days in terms of what you could do with that, rotoscope animation and whatnot. And now we're at a point where, games, you can do a lot of things. But are there things still technically that you feel held back? That, things you want to do in like, the latest MK that you still can't get there? It's like you always want more polygons, more animation, but from a gameplay perspective, it's interesting that you've been, it's still the same core fighting game, but do you still feel it all restricted creatively because this medium can't give you enough of something?
I don't know if I'd call it restrictive as much as I'd say that, by nature of fighting games, it's just, it's one-on-one.
Yep.
It'd be great to introduce more of a team element to it.
Yeah.
A lot of online is guilds and groups and all of the the kind of collective gameplay experience that you have. So it'd be great to have a 5-on-5, a team of 5 fighters.
5-on-5 MK. Anyone in?
Yeah. It'd be a lot of and it'd be a great to see tournaments where there's teams of people, kind of like you see a team of people playing
a MOBA or
League of Legends or something like that. And so I would love to see, I guess you'd have to have, the kind of the memory to hold all the characters in there and the environments and all the animations that go with it. But as far as just expanding the amount of memory and letting more players than just 1-on-1 or 2-on-2 play it.
Fighting games are so much about the control and the feel of the game. I'm curious, how much of does that move from one game to the next? Like, at what point do you totally rewrite the code, or how much carries forward? I mean, from even the early arcade games and whatnot. I mean, do you when you do a new MK, I'm sure you don't start fresh, but like, how does that get updated over time?
We usually have just a feeling of when it's time to change. Like when we did the first 3 Mortal Kombat games, 3D games were 3D fighters were starting to really kind of rise up. Tekken, Virtual Fighter, Dead or Alive, and that was just kind of like the direction things were going. And so we were kind of, okay, let's go into more of a 3D feel. And then after about 3 games of that, everything we were just feeling was going back to 2D, and that's Mortal Kombat 9 was going back to 2D.
Yep.
And so we always think of it as like rebooting the fighting engine. We always feel like after a certain amount of time, if you don't change it, people will feel like they've had that experience already, even if you put prettier graphics on it. I've always felt like, it's a bit of a risk, but I think it's more risky to keep doing the same thing, and eventually, over time, you just kind of fade away. I think that's one of the reasons why Mortal Kombat has stuck along, is we haven't been afraid to mix things up with it.
Absolutely, and now getting to multi-stage arenas. I mean, there's just there's so much more that you can sort of build on. But you're right, it's still that sort of one-on-one action. All right, well, we're going to go some questions people have. We're going to let you guys in the audience ask questions. We're also going to have a video question from Facebook first. Wait a sec. One video question from Facebook. We'll get to you.
I'm here with Jocelyn from Valencia, California. Jocelyn, what's your question?
Oh, this question is for Mr. Boon. As a mom of 2 boys who grew up with Mortal Kombat on their Christmas list, I wanted to know what's the passion that drives you to evolve this game from one level to the next to make it more exciting for all your consumers, especially the young generation.
So what's the passion that drives you?
Some of it is the technology, as you said. Being able to do something that we didn't do before. It just opens ideas, kind of flowing as far as what we can do. Suddenly, when we're going from sprites to polygons to online components to all these features, it just, you have a lot of ideas when there's a bigger palette of things to do. And thankfully, technology has been, moving so fast, accelerating. If anything, it's just made the direction that we want to take a lot more clear every time.
We have a question here from someone watching on Facebook Live. Justin Long wants to know, will we be seeing Frost ever again?
Ever again? Probably. Yeah. As close as I could come.
All right.
I certainly can't confirm or anything like that.
Can't confirm or deny anything. All right. We got lots more Facebook questions coming in, but want to get, oh, wow. We got a lot of people. We don't have mics upstairs, so if you guys want to ask a question, you're going to have to come downstairs, just so you know. But we'll start down here. There are lots of questions. Let's start with you right there, ma'am. Yeah, we're going to bring a mic to you.
Hello? Hi. Is it on?
Mic's working?
Okay. So my question is regarding, is there a chance that Mortal Kombat would be, is there a version of Mortal Kombat as a story that you would turn into a VR game at any time?
Mortal Kombat VR. I don't know how that would work.
Oh, VR?
Not sure.
I guess just to the point before of when new technology becomes available, that's certainly a discussion that we've had. And you'd be crazy not to talk about it. So
Mortal Kombat for the Wii, I remember back in the day, right?
That's right. That's right.
Fond memories.
Yeah. I saw. I was on the E3 show floor, and I saw that there was a demo of a guy. He was playing a boxing game in VR.
Yeah.
And he looked so tired. Oh my God. He did not look amused. And so some of those things, you think, that'd be fun for 4 minutes.
Right. Yeah, we'll have to see. Oh wow! All right, you got a lot. Almost every hand is up with a question. Let's go to you right here in the front over here.
When if you can remember this, if you remember that, did the producers or whatever for the film wanted it to be an R-rated film or a PG-13 film when they suggested a movie, when they proposed it?
Do I remember, or did they?
Did they propose it as an R movie?
No, I think from the very beginning, I think they wanted it to be PG-13. I think that they had, they were aware that the game had fans that were skewing younger, and even though it had an M-rated, it was an M-rated game, they wanted to really push PG-13 as far as they could. I think you notice in the opening scene, like Shang Tsung breaks somebody's back, like Liu Kang's brother's back, which I shouldn't be laughing at. And
sick, twisted mind of Ed Boon.
But they had it was pretty clear from the very beginning that they wanted it to be PG-13.
Wow, cool. All right, we got lots of questions. Like every hand is in the audience. You right here, ma'am? Yep, we'll get you a mic. Yep, yeah, red shirt, yep.
Hello, what made you think of babalities?
When did we think of them?
Yeah, what made you think of putting it in a game?
It was, they were a direct response to, it was a tongue-in-cheek response to the attention that the fatalities were getting. We were like, let's do this, a friendship, like the exact opposite of what Mortal Kombat is. And so, like Baraka gives the guy a present and always, and that was, that was a lot of fun to come up with them. And at that point, no matter what secret we put in the game, it was the coolest thing in the world. And I was like, Dan Forden was our audio guy. He said, let's turn him into a baby and let's call it Babality, And then we was like, he's like, no, I'm serious.
That's it. Let's do it.
So Dan Forden was the guy who came up with Babalities, yeah.
All right. Next question. Let's go to the guy in the black hoodie right there. Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. Hi. So when I was a kid, I would watch the Deadly Alliance behind-the-scenes documentaries a lot, and I saw that a lot of the characters were born out of restriction and limitations. At which point in the series did you think, oh wow, this has a potential for storytelling and lore? And when did you start developing it further?
Good question.
That's another kind of technology response. Is that was the first game that we did that was on CD-ROM, and you just had a lot more data, and so suddenly we can tell a much more elaborate story. The first games were arcade games. They had those ROM chips, and we used up everything we could for the graphics. And so that was certainly one of the things that came to mind was let's start expanding on the story. That was one of the things people really seemed to have liked about Mortal Kombat was its lore. Everybody's associating with the character a little bit more, and so CD-ROMs was our main thing.
Awesome. All right. Next question. Let's go way in the back there, in the yellow. Oh, these questions from women too. Across all.
Hi. I want to know, how do you decide what characters go in Injustice and in Mortal Kombat? What are those development meetings like?
How do we decide which characters we're going to have?
Mm-hmm.
A big variable is people yelling, tweeting.
What the fans say on Twitter, right?
Tweeting, threatening.
Yes.
The bigger the threat, the better the no. Yeah. And so a lot of it is feedback from fans. A lot of it is just getting a pulse. We just introduced Red Hood in Injustice, and that was an absolute response to just the volume of people insisting that character gets in the game.
Awesome. Let's go to the guy in the Mario hat, right? Or girl, Mario hat,
yeah. Will there ever be a crossover with Street Fighter?
MK Cross Street Fighter. Let's roll the trailer.
Yeah. I wish I came up with that joke. We came really close. When we actually mocked up, and I sent it to Geoff. We couldn't get it up there. We had mocked up a Ken and a Scorpion. Yeah, exactly. Kind of facing each other off, and when we had a discussion about it.
How long ago was this?
This was right at about Deadly Alliance.
Okay.
So it was like I forgot when it was, 2000.
Wow.
And so the discussions were had, but Capcom and Midway, so we hated each other. No, we didn't hate each other. But actually, I'm a huge fan of Street Fighter, and I as a player, I'd love to see it. You'd have to answer questions of like, what's the fighting engine? Is it PG? PG. Is it M-rated or is it But it's certainly been discussed.
All right. We should answer questions all day. I think we got time for maybe one or two more questions. All right, maybe the guy holding up the Mortal Kombat box, Genesis box.
Yeah, maybe him.
Exactly.
I just want sign this, please.
That's not fair. That's not a question. Exactly. Yeah. Let's,
the answer is no.
Exactly.
Okay.
I'll sign.
Hey, I'm a huge fan of Mortal Kombat ever since it came out. I had a question for you about like Shaolin monks. Would you ever consider like making the dream team of Scorpion and Sub-Zero? Like, when I saw Mortal Kombat ending Sub-Zero, at the end it shows Scorpion and Sub-Zero together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So could you possibly make a game where Scorpion and Sub-Zero are together, and then you could have...
We had one. The team that was where Shaolin Monks was developed was in Moore Park. It was a group called Paradox.
Yep.
And when they finished Shaolin Monks, they started working on a game called Mortal Kombat Fire and Ice, which was Scorpion and Sub-Zero together. and they had a mock-up, a demo going, and we were very excited about it. And then, you know, through circumstances out of everybody's control, we just couldn't move forward with it. But everybody was very excited about it. It's a very, very talented team.
That's awesome. And
so,
also, I have my Mortal Kombat X comic. I wanted you to sign too. So
Ed Boon, you're a popular man. All right, we're not really doing signings or autographs here. It's up to you, Ed, on what you'd like to do. All right, well, unfortunately, guys, we are out of time. We'll just have to bring Ed back next year to answer more questions.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Awesome. Ed Boon, everyone, a true legend in the video game business. Thanks, Ed.